We continue now at the top of Daf Yudalid Amud Aleph and Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 14a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah said that if a person says chulin sha'ochalach, the food that I eat of yours is chulin, so then it's going to be mutter. And the inference that we can draw is if the person says la chulin sha'ochalach, let's say the person says it is not chulin that which I eat of yours, so then by inference we would assume that that which I eat of yours is carbon and it should be aser. And so the Gemara said it can't be that the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir doesn't hold of la v'tashomein. He doesn't hold that you can take from it, you can draw an inference from a no to a yes, meaning to say you can't say that since the Mishnah implies, or since the person implies when he says lo chulin, it's not chulin, that which I eat of yours, and therefore we draw an inference that it's carbon, that it's aser, and it would be aser. Rabbi Meir would say it's not aser, because Rabbi Meir says you can't create the aser through an inference, because he doesn't hold the michlal lav atashomei. Viela, so rather, what are you going to say? Who's the author of that line in the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, as the Mefarish over here says, Elo Rabbi Yehuda, he de islay michlal lavhein. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that does hold that we can draw an inference from the negative to the positive. But the problem with that is, hainu reisha, that's the same as the reisha, meaning there's already a Mishnah earlier that says the exact same thing. Rabbi Yehuda already says that. The Mefarish over here says, hainu reisha kalamar, what it means to say is as follows. Kvar tanina b'pirkin de le'el, we already learned in the earlier perek, l'chulin sha'ochalach, lo kasher v'chulu, it already said this halacha, umukminan lo Rabbi Yehuda, and we said that Mishnah was like Rabbi Yehuda. Umay kam ashbul anhacha, so what are we teaching over here? It seems to be the same. And so here the Mefarish already gives the answer the Gemara is about to give. Elavada, rather, it must be as follows. Lo itzrich hacha chulin. That whole line in our Mishnah right here by chulin, we don't even really need it. Ela aidi deba lemisni kibesar chazir kavodas kochavim tana nami chulin. We're going to have other cases in the Mishnah where an isser is not created. Let's say the person says this should be like the meat of chazir, of pig, or if he says it should be like avodas kochavim, those cases are not considered that you're not making the neder with a davar hanodar. Those are something that is aser, and therefore it doesn't create an isser. So once we list that, so we list this case as well, the case of chulin sha'ochalach, and that's what the Gemara says. V'yela Rabbi Yehuda hainu reisha. Again, it can't be if it's Rabbi Yehuda, isn't it the same as the reisha? And the Gemara answers like the Mefarish just said. Aidi dekatani kibsar chazir kavodas kochavim. Since we have in the Mishnah the other cases that are mutter like besar chazir and avodas kochavim lahachi katani chulin. That's why we write chulin as well. But chulin, it is true, we've already learned that halacha. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Ravina Amar, Ravina says, Hachi Katani, this is what it's saying. It's saying as follows. This is how you should understand the Mishnah. Ve'elu mutarin kichulin. The following cases are mutar like chulin. Kibesar chazir, kavodas kochavim. If a person says it should be like besar chazir, or a person says like avodas kochavim, that is the same as the halacha by chulin. But again, the Mishnah isn't there to teach us the case by chulin. And the Gemara continues, V'ilo tana chulin. Now, if I did not learn chulin, hava amina boy she'ela. In other words, let's say it didn't say it this way. Why is it phrasing it this way, that these cases are mutter like chulin? No, because if it didn't say that these cases are mutter like chulin, I would have said maybe there's at least a d'Rabbanan requirement that you should do she'ela, meaning you should try to ask a chacham and undo the neder. We should be machmir as if it was a good neder. So the reason why we say in the Mishnah ve'elu mutar kechulin is to say it is completely mutter. The Mefarish over here says, V'lo tana chulin, demashma mutter kechulin. If not for the way the Mishnah phrased it by saying this is mutter like chulin, kechulin, so have amina boy she'ela l'chacham. I would have thought, okay, even though it's not really a neder, but still you should do a she'ela l'chacham. Ask a chacham to undo the neder. Hey chada amar kebesar chazir or kavodas kochavim. If the person does say that this should be like besar chazir or avodas kochavim, boy l'mishal, he have a neder ilo. He should at least do a she'ela. U'lahachi tana chulin l'meimar d'chulin gemurin inu d'lo boy she'ela. That's why it's phrased in this way in the Mishnah, to say no, it's completely mutter, just like chulin, it's like chulin gemurin, and there's no issue whatsoever. But the Gemara continues 1 second. Is it even possible to think that we would be machmir over here by besar chazir and avodas kochavim, that you would require she'ela? But it says at the end of the Mishnah, let's say a person says to his wife, you are going to be to me like mother, like my mother. So in that case also it's not really a neder, but the Mishnah said, poschin lo pesach mimakam acher. We try to find an opening, meaning we try to find some opening of regret and undo it also. It's like a chumrah that you have to find the Pesach and undo the neder, even though it's not a real neder, meaning you need she'ela in that case, but that sounds like only in that case you need she'ela. Mechlal dereisha lo boy she'ela. Sounds like in the first part of the Mishnah you don't need she'ela. You wouldn't need to phrase it as saying it's mutter kechulin. It's obvious in the reisha you don't need she'ela, because only in the seifa she'ela was required. Ela machvarta chulin memela naspa. So the Gemara says, you're right, go back to the original answer. Chulin is just brought in memela, but like we said earlier, it's just brought in memela. Really, the main chiddush is is Besar Chazir and Avodas Kochavim, and there is no real Chiddush by Chulin. It's a repeat from an earlier Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Menohani mili. So from where do we know this halacha? Meaning to say the halacha that when a person makes a neder and he's saying this should be like this, it has to be a davar hanoder. He has to compare it to something that became prohibited through a neder. But if he says that this should be like something which is aser, that does not create a neder. How do we know that? Amar Kratz, because the pasuk says Ishki Yidor Neder LaHashem. It says you make a neder at Yidor Bedavar Hanader. We learn from the pasuk. It says Ki Yidor Neder. So you have to make the neder when you're associating it with another item. It has to be a Davar Hanader. But the Gemara says if that's the case, Yachi if so Afilu Bedavar HaAser Nami. If that's what you're learning from the pasuk, we have a pasuk that indicates Davar HaAser also. Because the pasuk also says Lesor Isar Al Nafsho. It says Lesor Isar Al Nafsho, which also seems to indicate that it could be a davar ha'asr. We should darshan it the same way. And the Gemara says, no, lesor isor mi boile l'chidetanya. Lesor isor, that pasuk is used for the following brisa. The brisa says, Eizehu isor ha'amr b'torah v'chulu. It says, what are we referring to here when we talk about when the Torah mentions this idea of isor? And the Ran over here explains what the chiddush is of les or isor misboy l'chidetanya eizo isor lashmeinon diafagav detali nidro beneder shelo neser elalo levado. The brisa over here that the Gemara is quoting is talking about where a person says that this should be asr, and he makes it dependent on a neder that was only applicable to him. The case over there was Dahainu Yom Shemeis Bo Aviv. It's the day that his father died, so he said this day should be like the day that my father died, where I didn't eat, or something similar to that. So there was something that was really only for himself. So Chayil Nidra, that there the neder is going to be chal. That's what we learn out from this pasuk of les or isor. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said Ha'omer liishto harei at olai ki'ima v'chulu. Let's say a person says to his wife, you are going to be to me like my mother. In that case also, it doesn't create a prohibition on a doraisa level, but we're machmir, we require him she'ela, just on a derabanan level, we're strict. Gemara says, Uraminu, we have the following contradiction, Harei at olai kebesar ima, kebesar achosi, ka'orla, uchekile akerim. If he says, you are to me like the flesh of my mother, the flesh of my sister, like orla, like kilayim, lo amar klum, that's nothing. And so it seems like it's nothing. That doesn't even sound like you need she'ela. Our Mishnah said you need she'ela. Amar Abaya says, Lo amar klumi doraisa. No, that means also the same thing. It means that's nothing on a doraisa level, but tzarech she'ela midrabanan. But she'ela is required on a derabanan level. The Gemara continues with another answer. Rava Amar Rava says, Had b'talmidei chachamim, habi amoritz. It depends if you're talking about talmidei chachamim. By talmidei chachamim, so we're not so strict, we don't require she'ela. But by an amoritz, we would require she'ela. V'atanya, we learned in a brisa like this as well. Hanoder batorah lo amar klum. A person makes a neder with something that's in the Torah. That's not going to be a good neder. Again, it has to be a davar hanoder. V'yamar Rabbi Yochanan says v'tzarech she'ela l'chacham. One requires she'ela l'chacham. A person has to be strict. V'yamar Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman says v'talmid chacham eino tzarech she'ela. A talmid chacham, he does not require that she'ela. So you see over here also a distinction between an am ha'aretz and a talmid chacham, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yudalid Amud Beis.